I'm Vanessa Rufus. We continue our coverage today of the shooting, and as we've heard described in recent moments, political assassination, according to the governor of Utah, of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. We've just gotten some information, of course, after kind of a convoluted update, hearing essentially authorities believe that they have a person of interest in connection to this shooting who they are questioning or hearing, and this is a separate person than the person that we saw detained in some video, a man who was inevitably booked for obstruction of justice, so unrelated to the shooting from what we're hearing at this hour. As we mentioned before we took this break, we are hearing so many reactions across the country, and that includes from young conservative groups. We've got Preston Hill joining us with UNC College Republicans. Preston, thank you so much for making some time for us tonight. Just wanted to kind of get your take. How are you feeling tonight? What is the dialogue happening right now amongst you and your organization members?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I would say we're all still pretty much in shock. We still don't know, how to process this. We're still keeping up with the updates, and it's only been a few hours to think about this. When I heard the news, I was on a bus on the way to my Wednesday class, and at that point, I had just read that he had been shot and was taken to the hospital. And so, I went to my next class, really not knowing what was going on. And so everybody was just kind of panicking, kind of trying to gather information and figure out, is he okay? Did they get the shooter? People were just looking for answers, and so we were all just shocked and horrified at what happened. And I think regardless of politics, if you're a Republican, a Democrat, liberal, or a conservative, that we should condemn these acts of violence and against somebody who, Charlie Kirk, this man, I'd met him before. He was, a father, a husband, and all he wanted to do was just to talk to people on campus and give them a platform, and just engage in dialogue with people. And so yeah, I want to give my thoughts and prayers to his family and all of the people who were there to witness that horrible event.
Now, Preston, you just mentioned that you had met him previously. Can you tell us about that encounter, and when was that, and where did that happen? And did he speak to you? Did you speak with him?
Sure, yeah. So he came to UNC Chapel Hill last October, right before the election, on one of his tours. And so because I'm involved in Turning Point USA, I was able to meet him beforehand, just talk to him, shake his hand, and actually get to meet this guy who has impacted the lives of millions of people. And so, yeah, he was just there doing one of his normal events. It was indoors, very similar to the type of event that he was doing today, where students were just coming up and talking to him, asking him questions, and engaging in dialogue. And yeah, so that was the last time that I saw him, and it was very just, I would say it was very humanizing to have actually met this person, talked to this person, and then read what happened today. It was just heartbreaking.
Now, I mean, of course, we know that Mr. Kirk, with the platform that he had and how vocal he was on so many different topics, I mean, I feel like he sparked a big emotional response from folks, whether folks agreed or disagreed with whatever he was talking about. And I'm just kind of curious your take on, his impact on people. What was the allure of Charlie Kirk for you? Why was he such an important figure to you?
Well, he was an important figure to me because from when I got into politics, 5 or 6 years ago, he was one of the first people who I remember listening to, doing these kind of open mic, bring your questions and he'll answer them on the spot kind of encounters and debate platforms. That was something that drew myself and millions of other Gen Z individuals to him. And his impact on students, his impact on college campuses, it's felt all around the country. And even with what happened today, we want to carry on his legacy and make sure that all of this work that he has put into this organization for the last decade carries on, and that his message is still spread across the country, and that we will make sure that we honor him in doing that.
As far as events or gatherings or, any opportunities that you and your group will be putting together, is there anything that's on the schedule yet? I know it's so early, but is there anything that you're planning as far as, remembrances or honoring, or as you mentioned, efforts to try to carry out what he believed in?
Sure. I don't want to comment too much on that, just because we've gotten some word from the Turning Point USA headquarters as to what to do with that. But Turning Point USA is not going away by any means. We're all mourning together over this tragic, heartbreaking loss that happened. But we're going to make sure that Turning Point USA is here to stay and to continue honoring and going with Charlie's legacy that he left behind.
Now, you alluded to this just a few moments ago, the fact that, whether folks are liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever their political leanings are, this is something that folks are denouncing outright. And we've heard, folks in the political realm, both sides of the aisle weighing in today saying political violence has to stop. This is too much. I'm just, curious to hear your reflections as a young man, obviously an interest in politics coming up and seeing these headlines day after day. In some cases, we have headlines like this today. How are you feeling about the world, about the country right now, about the way things are going?
Yeah, well, after seeing what happened today, I hope that just for a minute we can, get beyond the political divide that is very obvious in our country, and just, at least agree on condemning this kind of violence, and acknowledging that this is not the answer to problems that people have with one another. Charlie was just somebody who, like I said, wanted to talk to people and give people a platform to ask questions and give good faith responses. And that's how he was able to just impact the lives of so many people. Was just by, not he's doing this unscripted. He's, talking to everyday college students like myself. And so I would say that even in this time of a heartbreaking loss, I'm still hopeful for the country's future, and I'm hopeful that, to see that we can still condemn these kinds of political violence, like what took place today, and still, unite as Americans.
I know there's still probably a lot for you and your colleagues in in UNC college Republicans to kind of process right now. But anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with here on Live Impact News before we wrap things up, either about this specific instance or just the larger picture of what we're seeing as a nation?
Yeah, I would say that the goal, I would say, of something like this happening, it was specifically targeted toward Charlie Kirk, and toward who he was, and the message that he brought. This wasn't an accident. This was clearly targeted and meant to take him out, and meant to discourage people. And after seeing that today, we are all obviously heartbroken and shocked at what happened. But at the same time, we're not going to let these kinds of political violence. We're not going to let it silence us. We're not going to go hiding into the shadows. We're not just going to pack things up and move on, and take this, give in to the demands of these perpetrators of political violence. Yeah, we're not going to be scared. We're not going to cave into the will of political violence like this. And so that's what I would say is just, don't let acts of violence like this, that are meant to silence movements, that are meant to instill fear, don't let them win. Keep going, and do to other conservatives out there, to other Americans, just honor, I would say, to honor Charlie's legacy, in what he did of just open dialogue and wanting to talk to people. I think that's something that people can acknowledge was a positive that he did across political aisles, regardless of whether you agreed with him or not. And so that's my message.
Preston Hill with UNC College Republicans. Thank you so much for your time here on Live Impact News.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate your insights. Folks who are watching here on Live Impact, we're going to take a quick break here. 2 minutes. We'll be back on the other side with all we know about this incident. Stick with us. All right, folks, thanks so much for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. Once again, I'm Vanessa Rufus. We continue to cover, as some have called here, a political assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah as he was speaking on the campus of Utah Valley University. Several moments ago, we got an update from authorities, and essentially what we're seeing here, there is a person of interest in custody. And we are also told there is a separate person. So there was some video that has been circulating showing a gentleman who appears to be elderly wearing a blue sweater or shirt on the ground in handcuffs. We are told that is a different person. That person has apparently been booked on obstruction charges, apparently unrelated to a shooting itself. So this separate person, we're seeing this person of interest who's in custody, authorities not sharing too much about them. We expect maybe because of legal reasons and an ability to question this person. However, NBC News is actually reporting that a source is telling them that the FBI apparently is confident that this person of interest is the shooter. That's according to a senior official who is actually referring to that X post that FBI Director Kash Patel put out shortly before 6:30 this evening. And that did spark a bit of confusion, since at that very moment, authorities were giving a live in-person briefing to reporters, and they said that they were still looking for information. They were still looking for anybody who might be related to this. They later clarified, saying that they simply just wanted the public to know that they were out there seeking for any information, video, anything that could help with this investigation. But you're seeing now some previous aerial images of the campus cleared out shortly after that shooting. What we understand, Mr. Kirk was on campus there at Utah Valley giving a presentation. About 20 minutes into that presentation, witnesses heard gunshots from a nearby building, and there was video that showed shortly after Mr. Kirk slumping over with blood dripping down his neck. He was quickly ushered off the campus, brought to a hospital, And then we eventually learned that he was in critical condition. It was the news that he had passed, actually, that was broken by President Trump himself. Of course, President Trump close with Mr. Kirk. So the campus empty, as you can see from these aerials. We essentially saw authorities there telling folks to get off the campus as quickly as possible. Obviously, classes were closed, and folks being told to evacuate, to the point where, as they were still actually looking for a shooter, they were clearing buildings, and police were offering escorts to students who might be trapped in buildings and afraid to leave, since that shooter at the time we were seeing was still at large. We've got some images to show you now, kind of a diagram that has been prepared showing the general location, we believe, where the shots were reportedly fired from. This is called the Losi Center. This is there on the campus. And the red square you can see was where Mr. Kirk was speaking. Approximately 520 feet. Authorities in their briefing around 6:30 this evening telling us that it appears the shooter fired from the top of the building. However, they were unable to confirm. They did not want to say the nature of the firearm. They wouldn't even confirm whether a firearm was recovered on scene. Basically saying that the investigation's underway and they'll reveal more information as they are able to. So at this point, very active investigation. We also know tonight, as we're starting to see reaction come in from across the nation, we are seeing political leaders on both sides of the aisle who are remarking on political violence. And so that has become a big dialogue here tonight, as of course this is not the only instance of political violence that has happened this year, with one of the more recent instances coming back in June with the assassination and attempted assassination of lawmakers in Minnesota. Speaking of reaction and, of course, the president, we have here a post from Truth Social with President Trump commenting, this is as he was breaking the news to the nation, saying, quote, "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me, and now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you," he concludes. And so we are seeing other political figures come forward. For example, House Speaker Mike Johnson sharing with reporters earlier today that he denounced the political violence, saying that this has to stop. Some of those comments, actually, I think we've got queued up. We can play those for you right now. And keep in mind, this is not only on one side. We're seeing the other side of the political aisle remarking, but we'll talk about that in just a moment.
We just want to make a brief statement here, and I'm going to go and ask my colleagues to join me in a moment of silence for our dear friend Charlie Kirk. We ask everyone to pray for him and his family. I'm just going to state the obvious here. This is detestable, what's happened. Political violence has become all too common in American society, and this is not who we are. It violates the core principles of our country, our Judeo-Christian heritage, our civil society, our American way of life, and it must stop. We need every political figure, we need everyone who has a platform to say this loudly and clearly. We can settle disagreements and disputes in a civil manner, and political violence must be called out, and it has to stop. Again, we ask for prayer. I'm going to go lead the chamber here in a moment of silence, and we hope for the best for Charlie. Thank you.
So House Speaker Mike Johnson once again making remarks following the shooting of Charlie Kirk, denouncing political violence. Really, that's the commentary we're seeing from a lot of folks in the political sphere tonight. In fact, former President Joe Biden posting on X just a couple of hours ago saying, quote, "There is no place in our country for this kind of violence. It must end now. Jill and I are praying for Charlie Kirk's family and loved ones." And we also know that among the first to make comments from the political sphere on social media as well, Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat from California. And he basically said here, I'm going to paraphrase, but the attack on Charlie Kirk is disgusting, vile, and reprehensible. We must reject political violence in every form. So keep in mind, we're working here on starting to bring you more coverage of that specific dialogue. We mentioned the fact that Minnesota just dealt with this several months back. So we hope to have a report from you from the scene there to talk about the aftermath of a instance of political violence, how that impacts a community and what happens after that. So that's something that we hope to bring you. Also, we're just getting commentary too from young Republicans. If you just missed our earlier hour of coverage, we spoke with Preston Hill, who is with the UNC College Republicans, talking about how this is not going to silence them, that this is almost kind of driving them more to want to continue what they saw as, the ideals that Mr. Kirk stood for about free speech and dialogue and debate. And so this is something that is really sparking a big reaction from a lot of folks in different ways. Also seeing commentary like this, we're going to show it to you, an earlier interaction with reporters and South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who did take a moment to point the finger for this shooting that happened today, and was followed up pretty quickly with a reporter question referencing Minnesota. So let's listen into that right now.
I'm going to say this. Democrats own what happened today. I am devastated. My kids have called panicking. All the kids of every conservative in the country call panicking. Just because you speak your mind on an issue doesn't mean you get shot and killed. And he was talking about mass tranny violence when this happened. In this country, we have the First Amendment. We have freedom to speak what's on our mind and shouldn't get shot because we believe in our system of democracy, conservative, liberal, whatever you are. You shouldn't be shot for your beliefs. Nobody believes in that. And I hope that every single Democrat across the country will stand up and acknowledge that they have a problem within their party. I just can't even. My staff are freaking out. My children are panicked. I'm a very outspoken member. There are many outspoken members on both sides of the aisle. I got in a screaming match with one of my colleagues on the floor because she had decided to attack the way my body looks because I don't want men in women's bathrooms. So when are my colleagues on the left side of the aisle, the Democrats, going to own the violence that's happening in this country against Republicans and against conservatives? It's unforgivable what's happening right now, and it's only going to get, I don't see it getting better. I'm worried about copycats. I actually just got off the phone with the Capitol Police. I've requested a meeting with the Sergeant at Arms. I am very worried. I sent my staff home today. They're gone. I don't want them in my offices because I'm worried about the safety of the people who work for me. And now we have to look at how are we going to function once we get through this devastating day, which it does not look very good right now. But how do we move forward? Like, I want to be able to walk and go to work like everybody else. I want my employees to be able to go to work, not be afraid to show up at the office. People are scared, and it's wrong, and we've got to come together as a country, but it's only going to get better if Democrats step up to the plate and take responsibility for what's happening in this country, the threats that are happening,
but Congresswoman,
and come together.
By that logic, do Republicans own the shooting of the two Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota? Isn't this on both sides?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm asking.
We don't know what condition Charlie Kirk is in right now. Some raging leftist lunatic put a bullet through his neck, and you want to talk about Republicans right now? No.
No, I'm asking.
No, not at all.
You said the Democrats
own it too.
Democrats
own this.
But isn't there a problem with political violence across the spectrum?
Yeah, we're talking about Charlie Kirk right now. That's the subject of this that we're talking about right now. Democrats own this 100%.
Congresswoman, you said all political violence.
I'm not going to let you take the conversation somewhere else.
You said all political violence is
100%. I've spoken about political violence when Ben Shapiro's house got burned down, when his house got burned down, Governor Shapiro, when Nancy Pelosi's husband got hurt. I've spoken out against violence of all kinds when it's been Republican or Democrat alike. But what I don't usually see is saying Democrats when something happens to us. Charlie Kirk, we don't know if he's dead or alive right now. President Trump gets shot, and you guys say, oh, okay, he didn't get shot, even though he got shot in the ear. I mean, they need to own the rhetoric. They need to own what's happening in this country right now. No one said anything about the young Ukrainian girl. None of y'all in the mainstream press wanted to write about the girl on the Charlotte train. Who wrote about that? Raise your hand. Anyone write about
That's
it?
been on
No,
ABC News.
they
It's
didn't.
been all over the news.
Okay.
It's on every
Did you
single news
cover it?
channel.
Did you cover
Well,
it?
I cover Congress.
Manu,
That's
did you
not-
cover it?
We all
Okay.
covered it. We're all
Did you
covering
cover it?
ma'am. We're all covering it.
So can I ask? I beg to differ. There are way more stories about Republicans than you guys have about Democrats or people on the left doing stuff, and it's bullshit.
Isn't that
What
part
did
of
the
problem?
Capitol Police tell you when you spoke to them earlier?
I have asked for a meeting with the Sergeant at Arms. I will get it hopefully today. I am very worried about security measures and security protocols. We've gone through this before. I am more concerned about it now than I've ever been. We've decided that we will not be doing any outdoor events for the foreseeable future. I'm going to talk to the Sergeant at Arms about hardened security and also physical security. I know that they've increased the budget for members, Republican and Democrat alike, as they should. Everybody should get security, particularly for high-profile members. But we have to talk about, like I'm traveling. I need to have security everywhere I travel because I'm recognizable. I have a trip tomorrow I'm very concerned about. But when you have high-profile members of Congress on either side of the aisle that are getting death threats daily, like we are, regardless of your political affiliation, you should get added security. I am deeply concerned. My staff is concerned. I sent my employees home today because I want to make sure that when they come back to the office that they feel safe. That's the number one thing.
Congressman, after the Minnesota shooting, there was a big push among Republicans to get more security. As you mentioned, the budget increase was part of that.
There's been a $50 million increase for private security for members of Congress.
So have you noticed a tangible difference in security measures, I guess, aside from that, since that moment?
I've had slightly increased security for a while now, and I actually in the last 2 weeks have been trying to seek clarification from the Ethics Committee on what private security means in terms of the $50 million budget. They doubled the amount of budget where you can have security measures at your home, but then also when you need private security, I've asked for clarification on that because I want to make sure that we're following all the rules, in what buckets that can come out of to get better security for us. So I'm trying to get clarification myself. I have been for a couple of weeks.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Congressman.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Once again, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace making commentary on the political climate right now and concerns over safety, violence that might be, brought against lawmakers. And you just heard her talking about requesting a meeting with the Sergeant at Arms for Congress, basically wanting to talk about more protection, saying her staffers are even concerned for themselves as well. We alluded to this, that we were going to have some more insights coming from a community that has dealt with this before. Political violence. Minnesota, we talked about the assassination, an attempted assassination that happened there just a few months ago. On the other side of this break, we are going to be joining with one of our colleagues from our sister station there in Minneapolis to talk about what sort of impact this has on the community, the dialogue it sparks, and the changes, if any, that happen in the wake of a horrible situation like this. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, here to Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus once again. We continue our coverage here of the assassination, as some have characterized it, of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the reaction pouring in tonight. And one of the things we alluded to before we went to break, the fact that political violence does impact a community, and there have been instances of political violence that have happened quite recently. So with that, we want to join with Morgan Wolf, who is with our sister station in Minneapolis. Y'all have been covering, of course, not only the attempted assassination of lawmakers there in Minnesota, but also kind of the fallout, what happens after that, the impact to the community. So Morgan, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Impact News, giving us some insights on what this does for a community and the dialogue it sparks.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I thought of immediately when I heard about what happened with Charlie Kirk was what we went through this summer with the assassination of our House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband and dog, and attempted assassination of Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette and his daughter Hope. And it's one of those things that even though these people had different identities and political associations, I think collectively all of our hearts can drop. And they're so similar in a sense, Charlie and what Minnesota experienced, but entirely different at the same time. Charlie being targeted in an open area surrounded by students at a campus versus Mark and Melissa and the Hoffmans being targeted in their own homes. And so, Vanessa, I know you guys, before we hopped on here, we were just chatting briefly. That day, speaking personally, will forever stay with me. I am our weekend anchor, and I woke up early. For some reason, I think my dog got me up, and I just checked my phone quick, and I saw all of these emails coming in around like 7 a.m. of potential lawmaker shooting was the subject line. And I just was so confused, and I sat up and I thought to myself, I'm like, what? Like this isn't something that would happen, and let alone on a Saturday morning in Minnesota. And then sure thing, I rush into the station, and we were finding out more and more that this was someone that dressed up as a police officer and went to their homes in the middle of the night and targeted Minnesota legislators. And I don't think anyone ever imagined that would be something that would happen, let alone having it happen to state leaders in that sense. And so just recounting everything, it was so eerie going through that and thinking that they didn't catch the guy right away. In fact, this was the largest manhunt that Minnesota experienced in its history. It took over 24 hours for authorities to find and arrest Vance Belter, the man that committed this act. And it just was such, like I said, I just am losing the words because it just felt so shocking. And I think even, a few months later, a lot of people are having a hard time coming to the realization of it. I mean, Minnesota is about to have a special session after 2 weeks ago, we experienced a school shooting in Minneapolis, and the special session will be the first time that lawmakers will all be together again without their Democratic leader in the House, Melissa Hortman. And it just really is, I think, a tough time in America right now, where we are seeing people targeted and killed for their political beliefs. Vance Belter, we know, had a manifesto going through all of his beliefs of why he was targeting state legislators. There was a quote unquote list that had a lot of other people's names on it, including our governors. And, I'm sure we will be finding out more and more about the shooter involved in Charlie Kirk's case here. But you have to imagine that Charlie was targeted because of his political beliefs, because he is so active and vocal about them. He is, as you know, a conservative activist and has really risen to fame on social media. He has over 5 million followers on Instagram alone. And it's going to be very interesting and I'm sure disturbing to find out details about this shooter when it comes out.
Now, we know that, we just played that soundbite with Nancy Mace, the congresswoman from South Carolina, talking about how she is calling for more security, and she's in fact supposed to meet with the sergeant in arms soon to discuss that. I'm just curious, in the wake of what y'all went through in your community, how was this discussed in the sense of we need more security, we need to dial back the political, violence? Well, like what direction did it go, I guess, in the wake of these killings or in attempted killings?
Well, I think first and foremost, political violence has been denounced by every state leader in Minnesota. There were so many people across the country that stood by Minnesota. For example, Joe Biden, former President Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris went to Melissa Hortman's funeral. And so I believe everyone, where you are on the aisle, it doesn't matter, is standing firmly in we cannot have these political assassinations happening. And right now, the conversation in Minnesota really has been focused on Capitol security, because we are one of the states where you are able to walk into our state capitol and walk up to a state legislator at the time and talk to them. And that is something that we always just assumed was normal for us in Minnesota. And come to learn of it, there are a few different states that don't allow that and have tighter security restrictions. We just weren't one of them. But that is going to likely change. From conversations I've had with some of our representatives and senators at the Capitol, they are really pushing for more security measures. In fact, actually, just like a month ago, I believe it was, there was a man that was arrested on our Capitol grounds, not once, twice, but 3 times, and he was found having a mental health incident inside the Capitol. He was helped. He was brought to a hospital. He is okay. He has been charged. But it brought up so many of those bells that people were already thinking about after the political assassinations of, what does security look like for Minnesota moving forward? And a lot of legislators are pushing for not only tighter restrictions on guns in our capital, because we are one of the capitals that you can bring a gun into. They want to crack down on that. They also are pushing for some metal detectors when you walk in the door. And recently, after that incident that I just mentioned about that man trespassing, they have limited the number of entrances to our state capitol. There were so many different ways that you could get in. And now you have, I think it is about 4 entrance and exits. And for us as press, they really have changed how they treat us too. We all now are required to go in and grab a press badge, and that will have a key for us to get into the building, because as you know, sessions can go really late at the Capitol, and so we're there in wee hours of the night. But that is something that we never really had to think about. Now that we have to have that security access as well. And it just kind of, shows the times that we're in. I think there really is a lot of fear for any local government. Certainly there's that fear at the national government level too, just in conversations that I've had with some of our U.S. Senate members and U.S. House representatives. And I just don't really know, though, how do we fix it, though, moving forward outside of where they're going to be? And you can't have metal detectors in every single building that a representative walks into. Or, for example, Charlie Kirk, not even an elected official, but certainly a political figure, had this event that he has done many times at different campuses, but this was open air in the amphitheater, and people were allowed to walk in and out. So I think it's going to be a daily question and struggle about security moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a great point in that, several moments ago when we had that latest update from authorities from Utah, you actually heard the Utah Valley University Chief of Police, Jeffrey Long, essentially describing the venue. And there were a lot of questions about security, as a lot of witnesses were essentially, in recent hours following the shooting, describing how there were no metal detectors and folks were just kind of able to walk in. Some folks were even say they weren't even checking tickets. And Jeffrey Long had essentially said that they had 3,000 people attending, and I believe he said they had 6 officers working the event. And he went on to say, quote, "You try to have your bases covered, and unfortunately we didn't." And so bringing up, the later conversation probably to have of what does security at these events look like? And will that change, I guess, the tone of the events going forward? As you mentioned, this is kind of the type of event that Mr. Kirk would have, frequently. It would be open air dialogue, debate, face to face with folks. So I think it is an interesting time that we're in. I'm just curious to hear if you've been hearing from lawmakers about whether they want to go on doing what they're doing, in the sense of, do they want to continue to serve with that spotlight and the fact that political violence is such a prominent, probably, concern or fear at this point?
I just have to say, it really doesn't feel real that we're even having this conversation. As someone that's been in this business for 10 years, I never thought that I would cover those big catalyst stories like an attempted assassination on a president. And we've covered that. And then to experience that a political assassination, not just an attempted, but a full-on assassination in my home state, it is just utterly confusing, honestly, to think of how we got here. But there are those conversations with our lawmakers right now that are scared, that do have those fears. There was one of the lawmakers I interviewed, actually, it was a few weeks ago, I want to say maybe 3 weeks ago or so. It was actually her first time talking since the political assassination. Her name is Representative Baha, and Boehner, excuse me. And she was one of the homes that the assassin went to before he went to Melissa Hortman's. So I don't know if you remember this timeline. This is kind of getting into deeper details that I'm sure not everyone got the full picture, but being in Minnesota, this is what we reported on, is that Vance Belter, in those wee hours of the night, he went to John Hoffman's home, Senator Hoffman's, shot him and his wife, and then he went to 2 other lawmakers' homes between the time that he went to Speaker Hortman's home and killed her and her husband and dog. I spoke to one of those 2 lawmakers who broke down about this, as you would imagine. And we were actually doing a story on a different piece of legislation. But I just asked her, how are you doing? And she says, every day has been hard. And that just is very telling to me, because here they are as elected officials trying to do right by their constituents and pass laws, but they lost a friend, and that is not something that is lost on them. It's very much so in their minds. And even just speaking with the Republican House leader a few days ago, she said, we absolutely are thinking about Melissa Hortman, especially as they are heading back to this special session after the Annunciation school shooting. So they are so focused on their job still, but it is very much so there. There have been lawmakers that have said, though, that it has motivated them to do their job and to pass bills and to carry on what they say was Melissa's vision and her beliefs. So there's that side of it, but then also the dark, grim side that they feel threatened, that they know that this is no longer an irrational fear of someone coming after them because they are an elected official. It's a very real fear.
Yeah, really difficult concept to try to navigate. And yeah, I fully understand, kind of the 2 sides. In fact, earlier this hour, we're speaking with a young Republicans group, and the young man was telling us he goes to UNC Chapel Hill. He was, what you mentioned about wanting to carry forward ideals, but he said this is only spurring us to want to continue on and carry on Charlie Kirk's legacy. But yeah, the fact that these these events are happening. They've happened. They're concrete. It's a reality. I can see that probably sitting heavy with so many folks tonight. Morgan, anything you'd like to leave our viewers with here on Live Impact before we wrap things up? Just either about, what you've experienced in Minnesota, what happens maybe weeks later after all of the spotlight dies down and the community is left still grappling with this. Anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I'll just say that, as I mentioned before, I know Melissa Hortman and Charlie Kirk were not on the same political track and didn't share the same political beliefs. But I think that right now, what I wished would have happened is after Melissa Hortman was assassinated, I wish people didn't point fingers right away. And that might be just my opinion and throwing it out there. I wish people didn't point fingers right away and just felt the loss. And so I feel that there is a time to discuss this further, and people can take partisan sides when they want. But it I think people need to just take in this moment and realize, put away the platform that Charlie Kirk had. And just think about, this was someone that was shot and killed in front of a crowd of people, and let that hit. And then tomorrow you pick up and you move forward, and they continue the investigation. Because that was just something that was also really just hard. I think, as we had so many different voices just coming at us, and we were trying to report on everything we were hearing. And it was just like, I wish we could just pause, and sit in that moment. But moving forward now, after what we experienced was, it was kind of similar in the sense that we had a manhunt, and they are still, what I believe, searching for the suspect, even though they said that they have a person in interest, but they did not say if it was the shooter or not. But there was, of course, the search, which Minnesota had all of the resources towards. The White House, FBI, they got involved in lended resources. The Minnesota BCA was involved. And having actually worked in Utah, I know that they have a very collaborative system in place as well. And they're already, I'm sure, working together tirelessly. But then once that happens, if there is someone that is taken into custody, they will be charged. They'll have their day in court. Utah does carry the death penalty. Vance Belter is facing some charges that could carry the death penalty as well. And I need to go back and reference when he's going to be next in court, but I know that he has pled not guilty. So after this terrible, terrible incident, and after the grief and the chaos settles, then that's when the track of justice will continue. And that's when you get the updates on court findings and documents. And that's when we'll maybe learn more about this whole situation, what perhaps motivated this shooter. If we know for sure if they did act alone. I know police said that they believe that this was a targeted shooting and the shooter acted alone. But you'll find out more of those details. And it's hard because it can be re-traumatizing for a lot of people. And I think Minnesotans experience that, whether they worked with Melissa and Mark, were family, were friends, or just someone watching at home. I think the updates on the case and the updates on the story, they can be re-traumatizing. And on that note, I think it's just important for everyone, if you're feeling anything, talk to someone and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And mental health is so important. And especially, I don't know if you guys have had this discussion yet, but we have resources that were given to reporters and people in the building after everything that we experienced, because I think you almost take on a sense of shock as well when you're out there covering it. And I can say that too, just from the mass shooting that we had within the last 2 weeks, that, people have been utilizing those mental health resources that we have. So this is just, unfortunately, the tip of the iceberg for this story, though, with Charlie Kirk. And as I mentioned, there's going to be many days to come where this will be a topic of conversation.
Yeah, a lot of questions left unanswered. Morgan Wolf with KARE 11, our sister station in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We appreciate your insights. Really, really interesting conversation. We're so glad to have you here on Live Impact News.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. And folks who are watching here, we'll just let you know we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. We're going to be back on the other side. We had alluded to the fact that there was just a briefing around the 6:30 Eastern time range. And so we want to kind of go back to that so you can listen to it in full and catch up on all of the very latest details in the shooting of Charlie Kirk as we know it at this hour. So stay with us. We're going to bring that to you once again in just 2 minutes. Thanks so much for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We're continuing our coverage here of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and as some have characterized it, including Utah Governor Spencer Cox, the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. Although we are still waiting to hear more from police about the suspect. If there is one, we are told there's a person of interest who's in custody and any potential motive they might have had in this shooting today at the campus of Utah Valley University. We're going to turn now to some of the commentary we're seeing from the political sphere following this shooting. And as we mentioned, the big conversation about political violence coming up here. So you're going to hear from various leaders on that specific topic. Let's listen in.
This is detestable, what's happened. Political violence has become all too common in American society, and this is not who we are. It violates the core principles of our country, our Judeo-Christian heritage, our civil society, our American way of life, and it must stop.
Political violence, which this attack seems to be, has no place in this country. None. I'm deeply disturbed by the threat of violence that has entered our political life. And I pray that we will remember that every person, no matter how vehement our disagreement with them, is a human being and a fellow American deserving of respect and protection.
He had the ability to explain complex concepts to people in very simple, understandable terms, even people who hadn't historically been involved in politics or historically thought of themselves as conservatives or one way or another. I think that's his legacy, and it's a legacy that's been cut far too short.
Political violence is not a solution. It is not an answer to disagreement over policy. And I think everybody really needs to take seriously both the security aspect, but also the rhetoric. It's got to stop.
So, of course, not only will political violence probably be discussed as an issue in the coming days, weeks, and months, but also discussions about security in general, because we are seeing that coming up as a question, as we have been hearing. We alluded to this before, the fact that various witnesses, folks who were at this event where Mr. Kirk was speaking on the school campus, were saying that they didn't have to go through metal detectors, that they weren't even checking tickets at one point. And we had heard that the Utah Valley Chief of Police remarking in an earlier briefing this evening, talking about they had 3,000 people attending, looked like they had a handful of officers who were actually working the event. So with that, we want to turn to some insights from Charles Ramsey, who's the former Philadelphia police chief, discussing the situation. Let's listen in.
Well, I mean, the fact that if it turns out to be that he took the shot from that distance, then I agree with John. That indicates a rifle was used. It is possible, since it was pre-planned, that the weapon could have been pre-planted in the university and hidden. So it wouldn't draw attention. If you did it the day before when nobody's on campus of any significance, I don't think people would pay much attention. So we don't know a lot of things right now. Is this person who did the shooting, are they an employee of the university? Is it a person who has been there in the past and has access to buildings and so forth? We just don't know a lot. The bottom line is this: outdoor scenes in events are very difficult to secure, very difficult to secure. Indoor venues, much easier. And when you have a crowd like that, of that size, with an individual who may be controversial in some ways, but he's not going to get the same level of security that a president did. And as John mentioned, I mean, President Trump was shot in an outdoor event, and he had Secret Service and other types of security at the time as well. So if you really think that, you know, to be able to actually secure all these events, can law enforcement do it? You have no idea how difficult and how many people it takes to really lock down a specific venue that's outdoors. It would take a lot of resources. And I just don't think that's going to happen. And it's a tragedy. It's a shame. Don't know if there were any threats that were made toward him that would give an indication that perhaps he was in jeopardy. But we live in a country now where there's a gun culture. I mean, this could be something where, you know, people are allowed to carry guns on campus. We just don't know what the motive was around this individual, but I think it's pretty safe to say there was some political motive behind it. But I mean, we have an environment right now where we've got extreme left and extreme right, and when you've got the country divided like that, yeah.
So once again, former Philadelphia Police Chief Charles Ramsey speaking on the difficulties of enforcing security at an event, although we have been hearing once again from various witnesses in attendance of the event that it seemed like security was lax in general, but you heard the former police chief there talking about how the outdoor element certainly adds an extra layer of concern as far as protecting folks. And we'll just remind you once again, the latest information from officials that we received tonight was that whoever this shooter was, the shots were reportedly fired from the top of what's called the Low C Center. It's about 500 feet away from that outdoor space where Charlie Kirk was speaking at the time.